Start learning.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the awkward when you're facing.
Video kissing palace is not very best way.
Yes, okay. Bio?
Yeah.
Okay, hello Romanji. Welcome to Doings of Peace. Thank you very much for doing this. My name is Pratham Pradhan, and today we are here to talk about media in South Asia. First of all, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
My name is Roman. As you said, I have been a journalist for pretty much my entire working life, which makes it now, I think, 15 years of working as a magazine editor across South Asia. I've worked in Kathmandu, in Delhi, and also partly in Colombo. I currently am the editor of a magazine called Himal South Asia.
Okay, Himal South Asia. How long have you been working in Himal South Asia?
So I started my career at Himal South Asia, and back when it was still based in Kathmandu. Now the magazine is based in Colombo, but our team works remotely. I work primarily from here in Kathmandu. So I spent about 2 years at the start of my career with Himal and came back to be the editor of Himal 3.5 years ago. So yeah, 5 years plus if you add it all up.
Okay, so when we're talking about South Asia and journalism, and you've also worked in India for like about 9 years, in Caravan magazine. What difference do you find working specifically for a regional magazine and just other independent magazines?
I think the biggest difference in Himal is, Himal says that it is a regional magazine, and we really mean it. What does that mean? Regional, you could do regional where you just cover all the different countries in the region. We try to think outside of the borders of the nation state, which means that when we are covering something, you might have a Indian magazine or a Bangladeshi magazine or news outlet covering the same thing, but very often there's this kind of a very national lens that's applied to the stories. What does that mean? Oftentimes that means that people's curiosity or sympathy stops at the national borders. So you're not asking about, you're always saying, oh, this happened, it's good or bad, but it's good or bad for a particular group of people. You're not thinking outside of that group of people in terms of what does it mean on a wider regional scale. So we really try to change that. We don't think of the region as only what's happening in the capitals. We try to think of regionalism, not Kathmandu to Delhi, Delhi to Colombo, Colombo to Islamabad. We try to think of regionalism across the borders. So from Tamil Nadu to Jaffna, from Chittagong and that region to Myanmar. So I think it really changes the way that we read a lot of the stories. And also it really changes the audience that we have, because I think that oftentimes with the national outlets, you also have this segregation of audiences by nationality. And our audience is spread all over the world, certainly, because there's also the South Asian diaspora, but we do have readers across all of South Asia. And I think all of those readers can come to Himal, I like to think, and find that they are not talked down to, and that they are not excluded, in the sense that we are not writing about XYZ should be done to help this government versus that government, this country should do this country should do that. Because for us, we are not trying to think about the politics of any single country or the interests of any single country or even the history of any single country. For us, as we understand the region, all of this is interlinked, and we need to talk to each other across not just national boundaries, there's cultural, ethnic, so many different lines. So I think that that's really the difference in Himal. We are talking in a different way, and because of that, we are talking to a different set of people. And that's the main difference between Himal and a lot of the other media in the region, I think.
So like as an individual, I am only subscribed to the national magazines or national media streams, and I can only see things from perspective of my own country. And I have heard about Himal South Asia before, but I hardly know anyone who would actually bring out arguments from these places and see this place as a region instead of a country. So what kind of impact are you guys seeking as a magazine, as a media, and what impact would you, I've already asked what kind of impact are you guys seeking, but what difference do you personally want to see through this media outlet?
I think, in my mind, I think it's quite clear. I think that Himal has always been committed to South Asia as a region and South Asian regionalism. But that regionalism can take very many different forms, right? There's the SAARC kind of regionalism, where it's all government to government, capital to capital, and the massive power inequalities, let's say, between India and Nepal, right? All of that is central to the way SAARC is done. And I think that's a large part of the problem, because India as a government, not as a people. India as a government has not been committed to an equitable regionalism, so SAARC is stuck, right? So there's many problems and hurdles with many kinds of regionalism. Our kind of regionalism doesn't fit in those frames. Our kind of regionalism, the one we believe in, and I think the one that Himal can have and has had an impact with, is people-to-people regionalism. And what does that mean? That means you could have trade, right? That's a kind of regionalism. For us, of course, as journalists, we are trading in ideas and in sympathy and in stories. For me, personally, right, the kind of impact that I love to see from Himal is, I think it's really, really mind-boggling. You say that, yes, you're subscribed to, let's say, the national magazines, and that's true of everybody in each of the different countries. But what happens when you need to also understand what's happening beyond your borders, right? Either you're reading that filtered through the particular interests and oftentimes narrow lenses of the national press in whichever country you are in, or you're looking to publications that are in the UK, Germany, the US, etc. And so we're always letting either national interest or oftentimes Western geopolitical interests change how we see the region, right? So if it's through the American lens, South Asia for the longest time meant what they call AFPAC, because they were in Afghanistan and that's where all of the interest went. And so everything was, everything that was happening in South Asia was kind of understood in reference to that. And there are other examples, right? It's not just AFPAC, but for me, that's the big frustration. For me, as a Nepali, certainly, but also as a South Asian, it is absurd that we do not have publications and magazines that let us tell each other's stories to each other on our terms as South Asians, where I don't need to explain to somebody sitting on the other side of the planet the references, the history, the culture. So really that's the big impact, I think, with Himal, that it is telling these stories in ways, it's stories told by South Asians, about South Asians, for other South Asians, in ways that we can understand, and in ways where we do not privilege any single national group or ethnic group or anything like that. That's what, to me, that's the kind of regionalism that we want, because we're not telling you should do this, or you should do that, or you should buy this, or you should trade that, or you should be friends with this government, or you should not be friends with that government, right? Our job is to make you know more about South Asia, because we believe that the sympathy and the regionalism follows from that. If you cannot know about the people who are living right next door to you, how are you ever going to have a regional connection? How are you ever going to have a human connection with them? So that's really the impact that we're seeking.
So for the last question, I just wanted to ask you, what kind of impact does independent media, mainstream media, and now social media have on our sense of region of South Asia as a region?
I think all three of those have very strong and very different impacts. And I think it's something we need to be talking about a lot more. I think that when we talk about South Asia, but also when we talk about the crisis of the media in South Asia, I think we are not talking enough about the kinds of impacts that it has on regionalism. I think that lots of people will know about the crisis of the media, right? What we mean by the crisis of the media in South Asia specifically, it's that independent media is collapsing, really, really struggling. And all of the traditional or mainstream media has been captured either by government interests or by corporate interests. And what does that mean? That means that each of those, and usually when we say corporate interests and government interests, those two things are interlinked, because the corporations and the big money has interests that it needs to protect vis-a-vis the government. So in essence, you have mainstream media and traditional media outlets essentially being captured by the state narrative. India is the clearest and most famous example of it, but India is not the only example of it. You can see this on, you can certainly see this with Pakistan and the establishment there, the way that the media is controlled. You can see this in Bangladesh, I mean, Nepal also is hardly innocent of this. So what's happening? You're starting to see media pushing not the interests of the people and what would be good for people in terms of better trade, better regional policies, etc. You're seeing media start to push warmongering narratives, for example. Last year with India and Pakistan, very clear examples. One side is claiming that Karachi is being bombed, other side is claiming that something else is being bombed, right? So suddenly you have the media being drawn into conflicts, national conflicts, where media is supposed to be independent of the government. It is actually fully dependent on the government and hence trying to please the government and serve the government's interests. Meanwhile, that is the information that is being fed to just masses of people across South Asia. And so the poison of that, the poison of those kinds of narratives, and I'm talking about national national antagonism, but also communal antagonism, right? Again, because the government, the ruling governments have an interest in pushing communal rhetoric and communal tension, the media, the mainstream media also follow suit. That is also extremely poisonous for South Asia as a region and as people to, if we talk about people to people regionalism and a brighter future for all of the people of South Asia. Independent media is able to push back against that, and I think that Himal is one example, but there are also others within countries where if you do not have the ability to stand independent of the government and critique that government, both on what's happened just at the local level, domestically, but from there zooming out nationally, regionally, internationally, then the media is actually, this media that has been captured by the state is actually a big problem and a massive hurdle and an active antagonist when it comes to regionalism and the future of South Asia. So I think that this kind of diplomatic aspect of independent versus mainstream media, I think within each country people understand the importance of independent media being able to stand aside from the government and independently report and critique the grand powers. But on the regional level, I don't think we're talking about that enough. The need for independent media also as a bulwark against the kinds of poisonous narratives that are now being pushed by mainstream media. And then social media, which I think right now, we've had multiple uprisings, I think, across South Asia, right? In each of them, social media has played a big role. And I think that we are currently in a period where, because there was so much capture of the environment, of the information environment by mainstream media and government-controlled media entities, social media has managed to break the shackles of that. And so we're seeing social media becoming a democratizing force, a force that the governments are struggling to control, and a force that allows democratic opinion and democratic organizing to take place outside of the control of state power, which is why I think we've seen all of these uprisings with social media being so central. And I think in that way, that's, I think, a good thing, because where governments have worked to control and to stymie democracy, here you have social media as a big counter to that. But I also have my hesitation, because I think that elsewhere in the world, we've seen similar moments. I think, the Arab Spring, for example, is an example where you have social media for some time, usually briefly, becoming this democratizing force until the powers that be manage to really rein it in, and then start to push really crazy disinformation, and to really push revisionist histories and all of these kinds of things, online cults of personality. If you look around even a little bit further beyond South Asia, if you look at the Philippines, if you look at Indonesia, for example, where you now have the internet also becoming a force for state and politically sponsored disinformation, revisionist histories where the military dictatorships and dictatorships are now suddenly being glorified, and you have a young generation that thinks that dictatorship is a viable and good form of government. So I think that we are in that moment. I think that right now we are in this window where social media is outside of the control of all these actors, and so it is a democratizing force. But I think we should be careful and hopefully retain social media as a force for good. because it can very, very quickly become a force for bad, and that's my fear.
All right, thank you very much for your time, Rumanji. We'd love to hear from you more some other time.
Thank you so much, Gautam, for all the good questions, and thanks for coming over to chat.
Thank you.